Hi, I'm Ernie.
And I'm Ben.
And this is Budget Nerds.
What was all in your mind?
You are not alone.
No, you are not. Friends, welcome back to another episode. Ben and I are super excited. I know we say that every single episode, but we really do mean it.
It's genuine, guys.
We get a chance to talk with you about YNAB. And today, man, I can't believe we haven't talked about this subject yet.
Have we never had an
touched
episode
on
on
it.
this? Like,
We've never had an episode on this.
oh man, I think I know why. Because it is like probably one of the hardest concepts that we teach. Like, it's tricky to explain, but I think we can do it.
It's intense. When I get these questions in workshops, there's always a long pause so I can like gather all of my thoughts and try to articulate it the best that I possibly can. So we're talking about the credit card float.
Dun, dun,
What it
dun.
is, its impact, how to get off of it.
Yeah.
But I thought before we get into all that nerdiness, we need to go back and figure out, where did this term come from? Because we get asked, did YNAB create the term, the credit card float? So I went to the person who I thought would for sure have an answer for me, our lead educator, Aaron.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone created this around YNAB, I figured it had to be Aaron, and she didn't. And she didn't know where the phrase came from either. So then I went to Jesse. He didn't know either. You know, he just figured, oh, well, we've been using it for so long, I'm not really sure where it came from. So Ben, I don't have anything for you. I don't know.
I put on my
where this came
librarian
from.
hat and I did a Google search and I limited the date range. And I did see on Google, there is no mention of the phrase, in quotes, credit card float, since before, I think it was, why can't I remember? We literally just did this before we started recording. I think it was before 2004 or 2005. Yeah, it's before 2000.
One of those.
Anyways, early 2000s, there's, so I was trying to think of an early 2000s band I could mention that that was playing on the radio, but I couldn't think of anything besides like my
Backstreet Boys?
Sure, yeah, Backstreet Boys are playing on the radio. Nobody on the internet at all is talking about the credit card float. So, and Jesse started putting stuff on the internet and talking about YNAB in 2004. So, I don't know. Maybe we did make up this term, but we'll never know.
Maybe we did. Not saying we did. I'm also not going to say we didn't.
So you guys can use it. It's a helpful phrase. So what are we even talking about? What is the float? What is the credit card float, Ernie? Like, what even is this thing?
When you swipe the card and then you pay that expense off a month later.
Okay.
That's the credit card float. And it's natural, right? That's what you do because you credit card companies give you that grace period, right? You got 25, 30 days to pay off the expense. But where it becomes a problem, and this is when you are riding the credit card float, and that's what we're going to be focusing on, is when it comes time to pay that credit card balance, you don't have enough cash to both pay the balance in full and pay for your current obligations. Mm-hmm. So you're forced to make a decision with the cash you have on hand. Do I use it to pay off the credit card balance, or do I use it for the current obligations?
Right. And so every single time you swipe that card, you're promising future income, money that you don't have yet, to pay off the card again. So every single time you get paid, all of it, or almost all of it, immediately goes to the card. And so then you have to use the card again. And it makes you completely reliant on that card because you don't have any money as soon as you get paid, it just goes right out the door. Right. And I think one thing, the reason why this is so tough is folks don't even know that this is a problem because they're going along, they're doing what they're supposed to. Or like, I pay off my card every month. Right. But you can't pay off the card and also cover your expenses with cash, with real money. And that's the problem.
Yeah, I remember I just naturally fell into the credit card float. Started using credit cards back in college. So swipe it, And then I was like, okay, I got to pay this off in 30 days. And so I've got to, here's what I have in my checking account. And I know I'm getting paid a couple times between now and then. So like I was always kind of keeping my checking account balance in mind as I was swiping the card. But then, and that was easy to do because college, I didn't have a whole lot of expenses. I wasn't ringing up these big statement balances, maybe a couple $100 here and there every single month. But then it started getting a little bit more intense, into adulthood where
All
there's
the
thousands of
expenses
dollars
are going out.
Yeah, every single month. And, I remember that moment. I was listening. I think it was one of Jesse's Whiteboard Wednesdays. And he was talking about the credit card float. And I was like, oh my goodness, that is exactly what I am on. I have a finite amount of cash and I have a choice. Either I'm paying that balance or I'm paying for the current obligations, but I don't have enough cash to do both.
And that's why I feel like it's really insidious. Like people get into this by accident. Like you said, you feel like you walked into it accidentally. And I don't like, okay, I've said this on a podcast with Jesse recently. I don't think there's like a banker somewhere like twiddling their mustache and being like, I'm going to get everybody on the credit card float. But it is a systemic problem. And I don't think any bank or any financial institution is incentivized to solve it because
that's the point.
Because it makes people dependent, completely dependent on the card. Because as soon as they pay the card, they have no money. And because they have no money, they have to use the card. They have to live.
Yep.
And if you took away the card, they would immediately be destitute. Like they would have nothing, and maybe not necessarily nothing. They might have some savings, but as far as like their regular cash flow, like paycheck comes in, expenses go out, that's all used up by the past spending that you did. And so it can get to a point where you are completely dependent in order to kind of maintain your cash flow. And that's a place where, financial institutions want you, because it benefits them. And it's not
the more
like
you swipe that card, the more they make.
Yeah. And I don't think it means like you're evil. It just means, well, maybe, okay, you know what I'll say? It means you're evil. It's just, I mean, like, you're not incentivized to solve that because it helps you. So that's the bottom line there.
And I think it is worth acknowledging that, there are going to be times where life is just crumbling all around you. Mm-hmm. You've lost a job. There's a death of a loved one. I mean, we could go on and on, but whatever, you found yourself in this place where you seriously do need that credit card to pay for the basic necessities. That's what we're not talking about that here.
Mm-hmm. This is like regular walking around expenses, but you have the income to cover it, but it's almost like a cash flow issue,
Yeah, you have regular jobs with regular income. Not regular jobs, but you have jobs with regular income, and you get to the end of the month and you're like, I don't have much to show for it. You can never feels like you're able to get ahead. Those are the situations that we're talking to with the credit card float here.
Yeah. And so I think it's interesting because a lot of people can be going along and say like, okay, I'm doing fine. Like I'm paying off my card every month. I never pay a lick of interest. That's what's interesting too, is you can be in the situation where you're completely dependent on the card and never pay a cent in interest.
That was me.
Yeah. And so you're thinking like, I'm good, right? And then I feel like we're like the negative Nancy sometimes at YNAB because we come along and we're like, actually, you're in a backward place, right? And some people, I feel like people get like, some people get upset because it's like, dude, I felt like I'm fine and you're telling me I'm not. Like, what's the deal, right? And so, like, why is it a problem? I think, like, what's the issue? Because you could go along forever and not, so long as nothing bad happens, not have a problem, right?
I always describe it as it keeps us behind,
yeah,
right? Because we're always relying on that next paycheck, and we just want to reverse it. So instead of using that next paycheck to cover the current expenses, we want to use last month's or a previous month's paycheck or income to cover our current expenses, right? So it gets back to rule 4. We just want to age our money. I mean, there's nothing Well, I shouldn't say there's nothing worse. That's really extreme, but it's really frustrating when you get paid and a good chunk of that money is already spoken for.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that is the heart of it, Ernie. We want people to get to a place where they are making decisions about their money ahead of time.
Yes.
And if you're on the credit card float, past you made all the decisions and you never even got a chance to make a single choice about any of your money until it just goes right out the door. And it's really the inverse of Rule 4. Rule 4, the goal of Rule 4 is to live on last month's income. It's to get a month ahead, right?
Yeah.
So the paycheck just gets there and it just hangs out for a month. So I get the paycheck and I look. I got to think about the left and right on the screen. I think this is to the right. Anyways,
that's too complicated for me.
All right. So you look to you get the paycheck and you look to the future, right? That's where we want it to be. All the paycheck goes to the future. If you're on the credit card float, you get the paycheck and you look to the past. You go that way, right? And you say, I'm going to pay off all the past expenses instead of I'm going to pay for all my future expenses.
Right.
And you never get a choice about what your money is going to do for you, which is, the whole point of using YNAB, of managing money.
And when you're on that float, you don't have the security and the stability with your finances that I think you want. I mean, if I were to lose, or Kirsty and I were to lose our jobs today, or one of us, we would have, since we are that month ahead, we're off that credit card float, we've got this cushion. So the cash could pay the balance down to zero, and then we would still have some left over to figure out, okay, what are we going to do with this cash until we get another job? But if we were on that credit card float, instantly it would feel like we were in scramble mode.
Right.
So we've got this finite amount of cash. We don't have more cash coming in. What does it have to do? Well, it has to pay this balance down to zero. And then we also have these other expenses. There's not enough to go around. And right. So again, there's not much security. There's not much stability there.
Yeah. It's like every single time you swipe the card, you are saying, oh, I'm good for it because I'm going to get paid in 2 weeks or a month. But if that paycheck doesn't come because you lose your job, that's really the crux of it. Or if there's some kind of interruption in income, instantly, like immediately, you are in debt, and not just in debt, but in debt with no plan to pay for it, And so, and it happens like that, like in an instant. And so that's why it's a problem. The other part though, and I mentioned this before, it's about dependency. I think that's really the most insidious part. It's like, I am completely dependent on this card because I need it to cover my expenses because I don't have cash to do so. So, that in itself there might be anything wrong with that. Like, we depend on people, we depend on all sorts of institutions in society. If I wanted a good gym today, I depended on that there's roads that somebody built, right? Stuff like that. So like, is it wrong to say, oh, well, I'm dependent on these financial products? No, but I'm not sure that this particular financial product has your best interest at heart, right? I don't want it to be dependent on a credit card because this, and you guys know how I feel about this. The whole point of a credit card really is to extract value from people. So, it's not something I want to be dependent on and rely on for stability in my finances, if that makes sense. That feels really fragile.
Yeah, and I always like to think of extreme situations. And so I'm thinking in terms of when you're off the float, you have more cash. And when you have cash, you have options.
Right.
Now, this is not really even extreme, but you run into a situation. Actually, I just ran into this recently where I went to buy something with a card. The payment processor was down, so I couldn't use credit card or debit card, but I had cash. So again, is that likely to happen where a situation where you can never use your credit card? Probably not. It's usually down for like 12 hours, 24 hours at that. But it makes me feel more secure knowing that I do have other options if something extreme were to happen.
Yeah. And people use a credit card feeling like, oh, I'm using this card responsibly, right? Like, I'm using it as a tool for myself, more convenience for myself, getting points, that kind of thing. But the reality is you're not, if you're on the credit card float, if you're riding that float, I mean, you might be getting some rewards from it, but you are not really using it as a tool. You're using it as like a crutch. It's like something that you need to hold up your finances. And it just feels fragile. Like it feels like at any moment you could lose that, or you could, or you could lose your income or something. And you're even more, it's kind of like a house of cards and there's like duct tape and stuff, it just feels fragile. And it is fragile because as soon as something goes wrong, you're into debt and you're into interest payments and all that, so that's the reality. That's the impact there.
Well, let's talk about, how do you know if you're on that credit card float?
Yeah, this is tricky. Like, because the whole point is it's insidious, right? It creeps up on you. And a lot of people are like, I've been doing fine with credit cards. How do you even know if you're doing this situation where you're paying off past it? Because it's not just like it's not like an on-off thing either. There's kind of a spectrum, like some people could be half on the credit card float where you get a paycheck. Some of the paycheck goes to paying off past spending on the card, and then some of it can go toward allocating to future expenses, right? And so it's kind of almost a spectrum. You could be totally on the credit card float where all of your paycheck, literally all of it, just goes to the credit card immediately, or you could be somewhere in the middle, so it can be kind of hard to pin down.
So I think one way you can do it is actually just open up YNAB right now. Open up the web app, open up the mobile app. Can you pay off all your credit card balances to zero right now, today, and still have cash left over for the rest of your expenses until the next paycheck or for the rest of the month?
That's the question. If you paid off the card right now, could you cut it up and never use it again ever? Or would you need it to cover your expenses until your next paycheck? That's the dependency. That's how you know you're dependent. And if you say, well, I could use it for a week and then I need to use, I could use cash for a week and then I need to use the credit card, then you're somewhere in between on that spectrum, right? Or if you say, oh yeah, tomorrow I would need to use the card to get groceries, or I would have no cash, right? That's where you know.
The other way that you could figure out if you're on the float is the total of your credit card balances greater than the total of your cash balances?
Okay.
And so, yeah, if you owe more than what you have, you're on the credit card float.
Is that true? I'm trying to think. I guess so, right? Like if you, so all your cash, like not even including savings and everything.
I include all cash because YNAB piles it all together.
Right. I guess I guess by its very nature. Although I guess here's the deal though. It's a little interesting because like you could say, well, I have credit card debt from maybe one of those times we talked about where it's like I lost a job or I had something crazy happen to my family. And you're like acknowledging that it's credit card debt and you're paying it off slowly. Are you still on the float? Technically, because you can have, this is where it gets weird. Because you can have a situation where you're covering any new debt, but you're also paying off old debt. And I don't think you're necessarily on the float if you're doing that. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. And yeah, there's probably some gray area there.
Yeah. But I think you're right though. Like if it's like if I took all my cash and could I pay off the card? Yeah, that's a good sign to like be like, oh, there might be something going on here for sure. Yeah.
So really to figure out if you're on the float, you got to do a little bit of math yourself. Mm-hmm. And gee, Ben, I really wish there was a way for YNAB to alert me that I'm on the credit card flow. Wouldn't that be nice?
That would be nice, wouldn't it, Ernie? Well, there's a new feature that does just that. Or at least it'll always alert you if your credit card payment category has less money in it than you have on the balance on the card, right? And Ernie, you
Yes.
had like a workaround to do this, like with like duct tape and strings and why don't you talk about that a little bit? Like how you
I've
used to
talked
make this
about
happen.
this workaround on Budget Nerds in a number of episodes because Budget Nerds, like we are the community where, you know, we're always making sure there's enough money in the payment category to pay those balances down to zero. So the workaround is you use that payoff balance by date target in the credit card payment category, and you set the date way into the future. So I'm moving my hands to the right because for me, that's the future. I don't know how that comes across on the screen.
Right.
But yeah, so like 2070. And so then anytime that payment category, that number dips below what your current balance is on the account, it turns yellow.
Nice. Yeah, and it
And
says
then
like you
that's
need
your
to assign
alert.
like 1 cent to this category or whatever.
Yeah, something is off. There's overspending somewhere, or something that needs your attention to get you back to a point where you have enough money in the payment category to pay the balance down to zero.
Okay. So that seems like something that just should be part of the software, doesn't it? And now it is.
Sure does.
Now it is. So if you have that you know, that crazy thing, if you're a pay in full person, you pay the card in full every month, and if you have that, maybe you listen to Budget Nerds for a while and you heard Ernie give that tip, go into your budget right now and delete that target, and you'll see a new credit card alert feature. So if you don't have a target on the credit card payment category, if you have no target set on that, if the balance on the credit card payment category is less than the balance on the card, it will turn yellow to alert you that you don't have enough money to cover the balance on the card right now. And that's nice.
And it really is just an alert. It's just surfacing information about where you stand with your cash and your credit card account balances, that total balance. So it's just helping you make a plan for here's what I owe, here's what my money's currently doing. Does something need to be realigned here?
Yeah. It won't necessarily tell you that you're on the credit card float right now, because you need to look at your cash flow situation to decide that. But it will tell you if the cause of that mismatch is because of credit card overspending. It'll just tell you that you have some credit card overspending in your categories somewhere and you need to cover that overspending. Or if it's because of past debt on the card that you haven't paid off, it'll say, okay, why don't we create a debt payment target on this category to pay it off over time, right? And so it's really helpful to just get that alert, and you don't have to do any kind of crazy strings and duct tape approach to make it happen.
And the other situation it will address is for the folks who forgot to assign money to cover the starting balance.
That's huge.
This is far too common. It just, when you set up that account, you're bringing that balance into YNAB. And I always explain it as that is pre-YNAB debt. Like YNAB does not need to know what you spent that money on, but it does want to know what is your plan for paying off that previous balance. And a lot of times folks will forget to assign money to cover it. So right away off the bat, they're on the credit card float.
Yeah.
At least according to their categories, right? And how they're allocating
And
their
it
cash.
could be that they didn't assign money to cover the pre-YNAB debt because they couldn't, because they already assigned money to all their obligations that are coming up, and they didn't have any money to pay for the past debt on the card. And that does mean you're on the credit card float, because remember, it's a tug of war between, do I pay off the card or do I pay for my upcoming obligations, right?
I'm just imagining the YNABber who started like 8 years ago. They've never paid a cent of interest. They open up YNAB for the first time, and there's this, or not first time, but they open it up, and for the first time they see this alert in their credit card payment category. And they're like, I didn't do anything wrong. Like, what's going on here?
I wish we had this from the very beginning. Because there are going to be some folks, and I'll tell you, this is why we're doing this episode. There's going to be some folks that have been using YNAB for a long time and just found out for the first time that they're on the credit card float. And so they're like, what do we do? Right? We want YNABers to have a better understanding of their total credit card obligation.
Yes.
So this alert is going to surface some knowledge for a lot of folks. And that's why we're talking about it right now. Because I think we're going to hear from a lot of people that are like, oh, I'm on the credit card float and I had no idea. How do I get off it? What do I do?
Yeah, let's talk about the way you can resolve the alert to get off that credit card float. First method is what we call the rip off the Band-Aid method. You just stop paying that account balance in full.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it means paying a little bit of credit card interest. We want you to free up that cash so you can use it for your current obligations while then quickly, hopefully, paying off that credit card balance and getting you to a point where you have enough cash on hand to always pay down to zero and fund those current obligations.
Yeah.
What do you think of that method, Ben? Do you like it? Do you like the rip off the Band-Aid?
Well, let me ask you, Ernie. If let's like make the analogy real quick. If you have a Band-Aid on your arm, what do you do? Do you rip it off quickly, or do you tear it off slowly? Like what's your instinct there?
As a somewhat well-adjusted adult, I just rip it off. Maybe as a teenager, like, oh, I like the pain, but yeah, I'm ripping it off right away.
I just rip that thing off, man. like I would rather have a lot of pain really fast than a little pain for a long time. And as I get older and my back hurts, I know what that feels like, having a little pain for a long time. So like, yeah, I'd just rather just rip that right off. So this is acknowledging that you're in debt. This is saying, you know what? I need to tell myself the truth that I'm dependent on this card and I need to instantly break that dependence. And the cost is some interest. Okay. And that's the cost of debt. That's literally what interest is. It's paying, it's a fee. It's a fee to acknowledge and thank the bank for giving you some money, right? That's what it is. So yeah, stop paying on the card. And because you're not putting all that money to pay off past debt on the card, you now have that money to fund your future expenses, your future obligations. You immediately break your reliance on the card instantly, right?
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. And then make a plan to pay off that debt on that card over time.
I don't think this idea is going to go over super well with the budget nerd community.
Oh yeah,
because we're optimizers.
It's true.
And the thought of paying interest, no, I'm never going to pay interest. I remember that was my initial thought when I realized I was on the credit card float. And so, what did I do? I kind of ripped off the Band-Aid, and this is getting into our next method.
Okay.
Where it's a little bit, it's a longer process, but you just go in restriction mode.
Right.
You start cutting the unnecessary.
Right.
So that you kind of free up cash and get yourself back to that point where you're out ahead of the game.
Yeah. It's like, this is acknowledging, hey, I'm in an emergency. I'm going to cut back. And either way, I think you might want to cut back because either you're going to cut back to start paying off that past debt on the card as quickly as you can.
Yeah.
Or you're going to cut back in order to get off the credit card float as quickly as you can, even though it's the longer way, right?
If memory serves me correct, I took some cash and I allocated it so that I was in that pay in full situation at all times and could pay the balance down to zero. But then I also had to, because there was less cash, restrict spending. So I mean, I did kind of rip off the Band-Aid in the sense that like, I'm going to deal with this right now in this moment. And then I'm going to, start getting myself out of that hole as quickly as possibly can. Because I hated the idea of paying interest.
Yeah.
So I did try to avoid that.
It might depend on how much you're floating. Like if you're a person who's like, oh, Ben, like I'm not that dependent on the card. Like I can go without the card for 12 days. And then the last 2 days until my next paycheck comes, I need to use the card. Right. Okay. You might even be able to find that money in that 2 weeks to find it, Yeah. But if you're somebody who's like, yeah, literally every cent of my paycheck goes to pay off the card and I'm completely on the float, I think go with the quick way because it's going to be hard to find the cash flow to do it the long way. It's going to take a long time, and you're going to have pain for a little bit of pain for a long time, which is no good. I like to just rip that Band-Aid off, tear off a few hairs, Let's not get too gross with it. But
And I do know for certain that we weren't super reliant on the credit card.
Right.
We only had one at the time, and we weren't doing the credit card churning for points. So we were just using it every now and again. So it was a rather painless transition. And then after that point, once I realized the benefit of being off the float, that's when we started churning the credit cards.
Okay.
And I'm like,
yeah,
okay.
A lot of people do that because they go into YNAB. They're like, I can do this completely responsibly.
I can do this.
I can game the system a little bit, Yeah. And in either case, though, if you're going to do it the long way, where you still pay the card in full, but try to reduce your spending as much as you can to get less and less off that float over time, stop using the card if you're going to do it the long way. Pause the using the card, use cash instead.
Yes.
At least until you get off this credit card float situation, and then keep going, because it gets weird if you're using the card and also trying to pay off past debt, and things get hairy. So I would stop and then start chucking money as much as you can toward getting off the float there.
This reminds me of my getting a month ahead story, where I was just slowly and naturally moving my way through Rule 4. And I never really saw much traction there. And I think I figured, I'll get there in like 2 or 3 years. It wasn't until I did a rip the Band-Aid off kind of moment. And for me, it was just taking money out of my emergency fund, using it to fully fund that next month ahead, where I'm like, right now I see the benefits of being in this position. I'm never going to go back, and man, do I wish I would have done this earlier. I think a lot of people are going to realize that with the credit card float as well, right?
Yeah.
Like, I am never going back to not having enough money to both pay the balance down to zero and fund current obligations.
And it makes sense that you made that connection, because getting a month ahead and getting off the credit card float are actually the same thing. It's just they're like the inverse of each other, right? It's you're getting a month ahead instead of and if you're getting off the credit card float, you are getting to the current month instead of being a month behind, or 2 weeks behind, or a week or 2 days behind, whatever it is. And there might be some people watching right now who realize, I'm on the credit card float, but you actually do have some money in savings that you could use to pay off the card right now. That's kind of the third way. This isn't going to be everybody, but some of you guys are like, actually, I do have an emergency fund, or I do have savings for, or maybe you just have a category called savings and you haven't really even allocated it yet. This happened with a friend of mine. I was just helping get started on YNAB, and man, he is killing it. Like he's doing it. I love it. But he was on the credit card float, not completely, more like you, Ernie, where it was like half on, half off.
Yep.
But he had a good chunk of money in savings that he hadn't allocated because he wasn't using YNAB, and he just called it savings. It's kind of like emergency fund and like a few other things that he was thinking about doing with it. And when I explained to him that he was on the credit card flow, I was like, you could stop paying on the card, or you could take that money in savings that you're not really using right now, and you could chuck it to pay off the card right now with that, and then your cash flow would be right as rain. And he's like, I'm going to do that. So if you are somebody who does have savings that you wouldn't mind reallocating toward this purpose, you could do that.
And just experiment with that. Open up YNAB right now in the web app. And I'm saying the web app because there's the undo button.
Yeah, right.
Move money from some savings category or anywhere in your plan, move it to the payment category, get it green once again, and just see how that feels.
Yeah.
Or maybe even just sit on it for a week. That you won't be able to use the undo button at that point, but you can always move it back, right? You can go to recent moves.
Go to recent moves, see what you did.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, that's a good idea. I really love that spirit of experimentation in YNAB. Like, you can just try it and just like look at it and just take a breath and say, yeah, how does this feel? Am I panicking? Or does it actually feel kind of good, or talk to your partner if you have a partner and be like, how do you feel about this? And if you feel good about it, then do it. I think there's nothing wrong with that at all. So yeah, that's a good way to handle it. I think just play with them and play with the numbers because you have YNAB. You can do it.
Absolutely. Do we miss anything, Ben?
No, I think that's it. The credit card float. It's insidious. It's weird. Just get off it, man. And then and then you can use the card to do all sorts of wild things. Or if you want to be like me and just be a hermit who lives in the woods, who is off the grid, only using debit cards. You could do that too.
I envy you, Ben. I wish I could get to that point, but I just honestly,
sometimes
I
I feel
love
like
credit cards too
sometimes
much.
I feel like I'm a sucker. I'm like, what am I missing out on here? But who knows? We'll see.
I just want to reduce the number of cards. I think having 3 is ridiculous for our situation. So if I can get that down to 1 and just love that one credit card, that's where I want to
Ernie,
be at.
you can blow up your budget in like an hour, but you can't do this. You're like being like me, where you're like, I'm going to think about it for 3 years. And then
Well, because this is something that is 50-50 with Christy and I. We're both in this points game, so it requires both of our decisions and priorities.
It's going to need to take some time to get there. That's A-okay. Yep. Totally get that.
Well, before we let you go, we got to share some YNAB wins.
All right, let's do it.
All right, my YNAB win comes from Alexis. Alexis emailed into the show months and months ago. Beginning in July of this year, I was about $10,000 in credit card debt after I got off the credit card float. I was always paying in full every month, but I was living off of future paychecks. Since starting YNAB, I have gotten my debt down to $1,500 and was able to get through the holidays without putting anything more onto my credit cards and booked a trip to Germany.
Nice.
So grateful for YNAB. On track to pay off my credit card debt within the next 90 days, and then I'm going to tackle the remaining $9,000 on my car loan.
Love that.
Congratulations, Alexis.
So there you go. There's an example right there of somebody who got off the credit card float. So it's good to see. And
was able to continue living.
Right? Yeah.
Book that trip to Germany.
That's the
pay
difference.
for the holidays.
I feel like all those money stories, like that happens all the time with wine. It's like, oh yeah, I did this. Also, I went on a cool trip, and also I had a baby, and also I fixed the HVAC, stuff like that.
And we forgot to mention that with that credit card alert, you can then create a target. You can make a plan. Here's how I'm going to get off it.
Yeah, that's the key too.
And so having that plan is huge. Allows you to reach those financial goals and then also continue to live life. So yeah, excellent. I love that, Alexis.
All right, I got one from Deborah, also about the credit card float. We're theming them today. Deborah said, my partner and I are longtime users of YNAB. It was integral to paying off a pile of debt. However, revenge spending after pandemic restrictions were lifted sent us into a gnarly credit card float cycle, and our beloved YNAB app became a spending tracking tool. Last month, I blew up the budget and started over completely. We managed to eliminate several subscriptions that were no longer of value to us. It was painful, but we also saw very clearly what was missing from our budget. We were able to re-identify our priorities, and I now have a new personal finance passion project that is all capitalized to focus on, saving for a replacement vehicle in the next 5 years. Love that.
Nice.
And this is a longtime YNABber who got off track a little bit and just started, we're still using YNAB, but went to a place where they were like, I'm just kind of tracking, And this is what I love. Because she had the tool, because she had the skills, Deborah was able to look at it and be like, I'm going to make a change. And she made it. She did it. And it's just so cool.
Blew it up.
I love it.
Love that. Well, if you have a YNAB win, comment in the YouTube video or email us directly, budgetnerds@ynab.com.
All right. Well, check your credit card payment categories, everybody. See if it's yellow or not. And let us know if you have any questions or you want us to talk more about this. Until next time, we'll see y'all later.
Happy YNABing.